Howdy everyone, Calb here with a video today. So I want to talk about changes that are going to be happening in the Edge of Fates alongside more Warlock specific builds and how you're going to have to change your loadouts around them. This video was actually inspired by another creator, Popoki, and if you want to see a hunter version of this video, I definitely recommend that you check out them. They have great videos. They have actually a lot of great videos. A lot of just fun build crafting for hunter, a lot of solo GM content, and they go in depth on things like Ergo Sum, which is, I don't know if I have my Ergo Sum build. Yeah, they go in depth on some Ergo Sum builds that not a lot of creators really have. So if you want to check out a creator that goes real in depth in build crafting, especially for the hunter class, I definitely recommend you check them out. So what I want to talk about is how Warlocks are going to be building their armor in the future and how stats are going to matter. If you haven't been keeping up with everything, our stats are essentially changing. They're going from this tier system in which we have a tier 1 mobility right here, no longer be tier 1 mobility. It will be now weapons, and what weapons do, well, from 1 to 100, they will increase your primary ammo weapon damage alongside increase your reload and handling, and then from 101 to 200, we'll get special and heavy ammo bonus damage alongside scavenger bricks, giving more ammo. Now that's just mobility. Every one of these stats has a function like that. So where's the downside in this new armor system? There's going to be these things called gear archetypes. Now currently some combos are impossible. For example, I've been farming up those combos in preparation. Class and grenade are impossible to roll with each other, and the same is true for intellect and mobility. In the future, it will be weapons and super. I've been getting armor so I can prep for this to see why we're currently dealing with that, because maybe these combos are not supposed to happen for a reason. For example, I think Warlock, where we're going to get into a little bit later, is going to be absurdly broken with this system, but I digress. All right, that's a little bit in the armor system. Now, I need to mention something that I haven't talked about at all yet: armor tiers. So going into the Edge of Fates, armor that drops will, one, have an archetype. You can see those on screen. And on top of that, we'll also have tiers. Now, tiers determine how much stats a piece of armor can have. Tier 1 is the lowest, while tier 5 is the highest. And in order to get tier 5 armor, you need the highest pinnacle content completed. In my opinion, tier 5 armor is going to be the end game player's goal. Most players are going to have tier 3 armor, maybe tier 4 armor at best. So if you're planning on making a build, don't plan with tier 5 in mind. Plan like this. Try to get armor that cannot roll like this. Try to get stuff like this. Try to get impossible armor, right? Or try to just get a average of stats, right? So I have 70 strength here, 70 recovery, 100 resilience, and 100 discipline. These are pretty balanced stats. Now, I'm not doing a triple 100 because how stats are going to change. 70 is going to be the new 100. And let's say you have a build that is just an average of 70. All your abilities and all your stats are going to be pretty well balanced. So you're not really losing out on a part of your kit, which I think a lot of players might run into. Now, for this build, I don't really need my intellect. I also don't need my mobility. I'm not using a primary weapon, so building into 200 stats is only going to benefit these weapons when I'm using them. However, this is majority a ability build. If I really need that extra damage, I have 25% from Radiant. If I truly need extra damage, this is the extra damage, right? Most of content that's going to be cleared within loadout like this is not a piece of content in which I am doing big DPS. At best, I'm doing burst DPS. This is like a GM loadout. It's not a raid loadout by any means, so I'm not going to build it as if it is one. This is more of a raid loadout. I have super high intellect for my extra super damage. Now you may be wondering, well, what do you care about super damage when you're on Well of Radiance? All right, I'm gonna show you. So I'm going to explain how the super thing works. But at first, I should explain how Sanguine works. So Sanguine, if you're inside of a rift or a well, it's going to do a 10% damage increase on the targets that you last hit. Then you add a Well of Radiance to that. Well of Radiance gives a 25% damage buff. Now, if you add in something that says increases ability damage or super ability damage, it's going to work for your Well of Radiance. Why is this the case? Well, you're the caster of the well. So you being the caster, makes your weapons into abilities. This has worked this way for years. It is not a recent bug. It is not a bug that has just been discovered. It has worked this way forever. Anytime you've been fighting a Taken Phalanx that has a shield covering it, aka the first boss in Prophecy, you are able to damage it because of this function of Well of Radiance. Where does Sanguine come into this? If you have super high intellect, let's say over the 101 mark, you're going to start doing extra ability damage. Now at 200, you're doing 45% more damage. And let's say you're at 150, I'm assuming it's going to be about 22.5% extra damage. Now you can see where I'm going at. So if you have at least 150 intellect, that is technically better than having 200 weapons. For a Well of Radiance, which already comes back super fast, you are going to be able to dish out insane amount of damage with a Sanguine Warlock on a Well of Radiance next expansion. Now you could do more things like swapping over to Prismatic. Your light weapons can do even more damage, but let's keep it simple. We're going to take our 45% damage buff, we're going to take our 25% damage buff, then we're going to take our 10% damage buff, and then we're going to assume you're using solar weapons on Sanguine. So then we're going to take another 25% damage buff, and let's say you take kinetic surges as well for your kinetic weapon, and you're going to be doing a lot more damage come Edge of Fates. So Warlocks, if you're ever told to be put on a well again, consider investing into 200 intellect for that build. However, you might not want to do that instantly because, as you can see right here, I have armor that specifically focuses into getting in a high intellect, and currently I'm seeing that my stats are struggling. Now this is because I was trying to build an ability which is going to become weapons, and regrettably I want to change that. I'm gonna probably refarm another armor set because I just have the time to do that, so I might as well try to do that. But the main goal is to blow up and act like you don't know nobody, but in reality is to have a more even spread of stats in the future. Because if I purely invest in the 200 super, I'm not going to be able to use my melees. I'm not going to be able to use my grenades. I'm not going to be able to use my class ability. I'm not going to have a good amount of health on orb, and I'm not going to have a great damage buff. Getting two 200s is going to be nearly impossible. And if you do get two 100s, your build's probably shite. Let's be real. I don't care if you have multiple 200s, unless you have like 3 or 4, which is definitely impossible. It's gonna be shite. You're better off, quite honestly, doing quad 100s or triple 100s, or even trying to get all your stats to 70 for the average player. Because if all your stats are 70, you're going to be good across the board. Your abilities are going to come back fast. You're going to be gaining health on orbs. Your health is going to be regenerating faster. Your primary weapons are going to be doing a bit more damage. You're well balanced. And you're basically playing the game as if you have tier 100s in every stats right now, which isn't too bad of a way to just play the game. I think the stat system is great, but I feel like a lot of people are going to hyper focus on increasing their damage so much that they might actually lose out on being able just to play the game as it is, because they're hyper focusing on a stat way too much. So with all that explanation out the way, what should Warlocks be trying to build towards in the future? What exotics are going to be the move going forward? And what is going to be the role of Warlocks in the future PvE content? Those are the questions I want to answer. Alrighty, so we're going to start off with the second question. What exotics are going to be the move? So what I have right now on screen is, it's not a tier list, even though I'm using tier maker, it's more of like a categorizer. So I have what each exotic you want to build for in the future, and some you may see say hybrid. And the reason why they say hybrid is because they either work with multiple abilities, or because of how you want to combo some of these exotics, it may not be worth just investing into one stat. Like something like Winter's Guile, it makes sense that you want to invest purely melee. There's nothing else on that exotic that says anything about any other ability. But then you take something like Sunbracers, which is something that should seem purely melee focused, However, if you don't have your melee up, a powered melee specifically, to be able to trigger some bracers, well, it's not going to do much. You don't really want to invest in the full 200, especially since all of our flat ability energy is going to scale. So if your strength isn't high enough, you're not going to be able to constantly chain your sunbracers loop. So you can't invest full 200 in that. You might want to at least invest 70 strength and then go 200 discipline, or maybe just keep it a little bit more simple and go like maybe 150 discipline and then go into a different stat. You get the point. I want to talk about like the best exotic in each category that I think is going to be really fun to invest into, and then we're going to cover some different topics even within this. All right, for melees. So there are really two melees, or it's kind of tough. There's three melee builds I can see being really potent. The number one build that's going to be really potent in my eyes is going to be Winter's Guile. So Winter's Guile is already pretty strong. And now if we can buff it to where you could possibly get your full melee back on just like one kill in the air, oh, that's going to even be any better, because what happens if you have Winter's Guile on, your ignition damage scales off your melee damage. And on top of that, if you build into the melee buff, you're going to get a ton of energy. And I'm talking about a ton, not only just a little bit, a ton of energy and a ton of damage. It's a big win-win. Now, Feloners, you don't necessarily need to have high strength, because what you're really using this for is to inflict weaken. And honestly, the best way to do that is actually just by doing a finisher. So you may not even need to build that much into energy. However, if you can have more melees up than you did in the past, it's not a bad idea. Now, the Strand Warlock chest piece, I always forget the name of this. This is a pretty strong build, and having more melees for that would be pretty nice. Now, for the class ability one, I wouldn't say any of these are going to be like really potent. However, it should be noted that Vesper already has a scaler for being surrounded. So now you're going to have a double scaler, which is going to make your rifts come back a little bit faster, which might even make it to where you can get your super really fast if you like use a bunch of domino mods. So maybe you might want to do a hybrid build where you build into class and you build into super. For Aeons and Cenotaph, you might want to build a little bit into weapons just so you can get extra ammo from whatever brick you pick up. I think that would be kind of cool. For grenades, there are really only 4 exotics that I care about in this section, and they all happen to be non-arm exotics. Starfire has potential to be a really insane exotic. 200 grenade inside of a well of radiance. We could see the comeback season of the century. Runecomb Raymond doesn't necessarily need the grenade damage, but if it gets the grenade energy, you might be able to have like 4 or 5 Bleak Watchers up at a time, which is going to be really strong. Verity's Brow, now that could be a pretty insane exotic to build into, given that if you get a 65% damage buff having 200 grenade, you have one of the strongest hitting abilities that isn't like a surrounded melee build. And if you have multiple Verity Warlocks in your team that can juggle the effect together, you might be an unstoppable duo, low key. Speaker Sight, having good grenade stat for Malevolent scaling is just going to be good overall. Might be possible to have up to 3 to 4 turrets up at a time. I don't know if it works that way. I've never really thrown that many turrets out before, but it will have nice grenade scaling. Now the super category. Anything that does with your super, you probably want to buff it. Geomags is going to be really interesting to see how that works, especially when you pick up an Ionic Trace. How much more energy are you going to get? But then we have stuff like Skull of Dire Ahamkara, Phoenix Protocol, and Storm Dancer's Brace. All of these exotics cap at 50%. However, with these changes in tiers, will the cap still be 50%, or would we be able to push the full 100% energy if you have 200 super? I'm really interested in see if Bungie is going to allow this to happen, because if that's the case, oh boy, Phoenix Protocol might just be back in a lot of PvE content. Being able to just chain your well by yourself instantly, it's going to be really nice. Storm Dancer's Brace, if you can do like full GMs inside of your super, that's going to be pretty nice. And Dire Skull would be almost iconic if that came back, because that's sort of how Obsidian Mine worked in Destiny 1. Now Sanguine we already talked about earlier, so I'm not going to talk about it much. Now we're at the hybrid section. And the exotics I'm looking forward to the most, obviously the exotic class item, Sunbracers, and Dawn Chorus. Dawn Chorus already increases Dawnblade's damage. Now let's say we build into super and you build into melee, which I believe is not a forbidden stat combo. In fact, I think it is one of the damage combos named Paragon. So that directly has a possible build that might be nuts. You'll be able to have instant solar melees alongside having your super back really fast. I could see a really cool build going on where you want to ignition snap some enemies, ignite the targets, have your ignite scorch, and build up your super really fast, hop down course, and then chain back-to-back supers and melees throughout an activity. Now, I wouldn't say that's necessarily a rate loadout, but I would say it would be a pretty potent GM, maybe seasonal activity loadout. Who knows? Alrighty, that was our exotics. If my voice sounds different, I'm recording this a day later, editing as I'm making this video, so my voice may change throughout it a few times. Hope that doesn't bother you. Let's answer the next question. What should Warlocks be building towards? I do believe the Warlock class ability is somewhat important to the class, but you could skip out on having it up. I will say though, if you don't have your class ability up, this is purely from a PvE perspective, you have to be ready to not have instant cure or a healing rift instantly. I don't know if a lot of players use empowering rifts. Me personally, I don't. I'm always having radiant up, so it's kind of useless to use. Plus radiant just provides so many more benefits, especially in next season's artifact, which we might actually talk about too. So you have to decide for yourself if you care about your class ability. Me personally, I do. So realistically, in my builds, I might want to have 60 to 70 class ability, so I'm able to use that. Up next, we have our other rechargeable abilities. We have our super, we have our grenade, and we have our melee. Now, it depends on the activity, but I'm not a huge like super spammer. Like, it depends on the build. Like, let's say I'm using my Ergo Sun build that happens to use Apotheose Veil and Spirit of Claw on the Prismatic class item. That build, I am constantly building Transcendence and my super, and I'm swapping in between. I pop my super, my dark bar should be filled for my Transcendence, and after my super ends, I have 2 light abilities, which Apotheose Veil then kicks in. So I build up my light bar, and then I'm able to pop Transcendence, and during my Transcendence, I'm able to build my super back up, and so it's an infinite loop. Now, in the future, I don't know how strong this build is going to be, because it requires me to build into 3 stats going forward if I want to get the same energy gains or even more energy gains. So this is where my suggestion of just doing a balanced build might actually be the move, more so than trying to invest 200 into a stat. With that being said, how do you really play your Warlock? Do you just play with one ability, or do you play with multiple? Because I know for me, I like doing multiple. I can't say that for Void Warlock. On Void Warlock, I know I'm definitely using my grenades a ton, so maybe just building pillions of grenades might be the move if you're a Void Warlock, given that our Void melee isn't too strong, and the Rift only matters if you're using Child of the Old Gods, which I don't think that's really a popular build. However, it is my favorite build, so what do I know realistically? But from a general standpoint, I think having a balance of ability regen will be pretty good. Then comes weapons and health. Health I don't see being super valuable. I do see in it being useful for proccing just a little bit of health regen, but I don't think it's completely necessary to invest into like Resilience has been for the past few years. I think at 200 health, you're basically getting 8% DR total, which isn't really worth it when compared to the other stats. And for weapons, building into 200 weapons sort of means you have to commit to using your weapons. If you like using your Warlock as a gun platformer, then sure, do that, but I feel like that's a bit more in line with how Hunters sort of play. I think Hunters excel at weapon damage, especially when we're talking about still hunts rotations, but a lot of that is also tied to their super damage from Celestial Nighthawk. So it's a mixed bag. Overall, I don't think investing into 200 weapons is that important either, because you're essentially just getting a Vorpal weapon for your weapons. And some that might sound pretty good, like, oh, I'm getting another damage perk on my weapon. And I'm like, yeah, that is true. You are getting another damage perk, but how often is that really going to come up for you, do you think? Do you think getting that extra 10% damage on your weapons is going to be the make or break for you for majority of content? Because I only really see it being really useful in a day one scenario where that 10% can be the make or break. But in most general content, I don't think you'll need it. And that's what I'm worried about with these stats, is that people are going to build into extremes and you're not really going to like it, and you're going to feel like you might have wasted your time. So Warlocks, how should you build? I think you should build balanced stats if you use more abilities, and then if you use one ability a lot more than the other two, build that one a bit higher. So let's say in theory that you like doing grenade builds. Well, maybe you do 120 grenade, but then you invest a bit into intellect, because hey, you want to have more supers. That's fair. And then maybe invest a little bit into health, weapons, strength, class, just so you can have those abilities up and not feel like that they're just no longer a part of your kit. Until we get our hands on it, I don't want to definitively say that building 150 plus into a stat is the move. However, I do believe if you try to get to the 50 to 80 range on all of your stats, you're going to have a nice feeling build. It's going to be stronger than what your current builds are right now. And I think that's overall great for a majority of players. So to answer the big question, what is going to be the move for Warlocks going forward in terms of our role to play? Well, great news. As of right now, nothing has changed for Warlocks, and I don't think we're going to have a major shift. I could see the possibility of some abilities becoming better than others. Some buffs to specific niche builds will rise up. And as those buffs and those patch notes come out, I'll be sure to let you know what I think about them. And the best way you can find out about that is by subscribing to this channel. I would truly appreciate it, and it would allow me to get the information to you as fast as possible because, hey, if you're not subscribed, I don't know where to find you. But if you are subscribed, you know where you can find me. Thank you everyone for watching, and I hope you have a good one. Peace out.